Cool. Can you all see that? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, my name is Ed, and I'm Science Communications Officer at Alzheimer's Research UK, and I lead on the media work here. As Hassan said, it's a very big privilege to be able to speak to you today. I knew Hassan from my days in Durham University, and I'll chat a bit about that as I go through my presentation. But the other things I'll chat about are what science communications is and how it could lead to a career for you guys. The importance of talking about your research in general. So science communications isn't just a career you can go into, it's really useful in your career as a scientist. And some of the challenges and pitfalls that you may face, and tips to really just inspire you to have a go. So without further ado, I will get onto it. So I guess I get asked a lot, what is science communications? And it's a really obvious answer. If you think about it, it's communicating your science to people that don't know about it. Now, these don't have to not be scientists, but they're just non-experts in your field. Often people think of science communications as outreach, which has become really popular in universities. So outreach events that you may put on, but this is actually sort of turned into a professional field in its own right. But science communications can include a broad range of things: science exhibitions, journalists, many journalists, English and history graduates, but they can also be scientists, policy work. There's no point trying to advise on science policy if you don't understand what you're trying to communicate and you don't communicate it well. So there's a lot of different roles there. I think we broadly class it as, just talking to people about science who won't know it in as much detail as you do.
Ed, can I just pause you for a minute?
Yep.
I think your slide is it's not full screen, so we can see a lot of in small.
Can we see all the?
Is there any way to make? I think if you press the presentation at the bottom.
Yeah, I was on that, but see it now or not? Full screen?
Yeah, I think this is a bit better, but yeah, it's a bit better. It's not full screen, but a bit better.
Cool. So I'm sorry, I don't know.
No worries, no worries.
Full screen on my computer, so yeah, technology's as you may. This was when I was back in Durham in the lab, and I was really trying to work out what I wanted to do. I did my undergraduate at Durham in biology. I was really interested in science, always have been, but I've also really been interested in English storytelling, the news, and during my undergraduate degree, I got really involved in student journalism, so the paper and the radio, and also we had a sort of startup TV society as well. And I really decided that, I wanted to stay in science at the end of the 3 years, but wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I had a great mentor in Dr. Elaine Fitches, who offered me to do a research master's, which I took. And, it was a really good exploratory go into what it's like to be a researcher. And I realized that actually I'm just not built to be a scientist. I have very big hands that are very clumsy. Pipetting is not my thing. But I really did enjoy looking at that big picture of what we were doing. So in my work, we were fusing together two proteins. One was a protein from spider venom, and the other was from a plant. And this plant protein was able to cross the gut wall of an insect, allowing for the ingestion of spider venom by a crop pest, which would kill it. And this was really beneficial because it didn't target didn't target potentially beneficial pollinators such as bees, but really was really specific to killing crop pests. So I really enjoyed that big picture of what my research meant, but wasn't so good at doing the actual research. But I was really enjoying talking about it. I set up my own social media page, talking about research, and this really got me in the foot in the door, exploring what I wanted to do, and started writing about it for the local paper and on the local on the radio as well. Started presenting news and science shows, and then by the time I came up to applying for jobs, I was applying for a few, and this dream job dropped up, which was Science Media Officer, Alzheimer's Research UK, and this is what I do now. And we do a lot of different communications here at Alzheimer's Research UK, and I've just laid out a few to give you an overview of what we do. So a lot of my work is to do with press, so we issue proactive and reactive stories as experts in the dementia field, and so we're trying to garner media coverage to highlight this, to highlight the charity, to highlight the research. And you can see on the top left 2 front pages from a story that we were asked to comment on there on the front page. In the middle, we also do blogs as well, a bit of a deeper dive into it. And I see that scientists have got a really good platform for writing your own blogs, which is great to see. And I'll talk a bit more about them in a bit. And top right is a silhouette of us at a festival. So we were doing some public engagement at Latitude Festival, where we went and engaged with the public about our brand and about research and about how they could help reduce their risk of dementia. On the bottom right, we have one of a science, sketch my science, draw my project style video, which is really trying to communicate the basics of the disease, of Alzheimer's disease, the pathological hallmarks, tau, through engaging video content for social media. In the middle, you can see me holding a brain, and it's not just someone a jolly, but we give members of the public the opportunity to come to public meetings and talks to learn more from researchers. And at this one at Imperial College in London, they offer a brain tour as well. So I was there explaining about a Parkinson's brain from a lady in that case. On the bottom left, you can see Dr. Jason Rihel, one of our experts in sleep. He uses zebrafish to study sleep and dementia. And you can also see seeing him being interviewed by Dr. Tamil Ray from the Bake Off, the Great British Bake Off. You know, a career highlight meeting him in the background. We set up interviews and do media work as well. So it's very varied, and I think that shows it. And it can involve many different things. As I said, a lot of media work, but also communicating directly to the public via social media channels, increasingly important, giving talks, producing videos and animations that go in a wide range of places, and also just writing old-fashioned summaries of research for supporters and donors. So a lot of the time you have grant summaries written up by PIs, and we have to translate them into engaging copy. And also you may have submitted through ResearchFish and other platforms. We take that information and make it into a story for our supporters, so they can donate and get excited about your work. And also it means helping organize conferences, and this often occurs. You talk to a lot of researchers rather than the public on this as well, but again, they're not experts in necessarily your field, so you've got to be a bit layer when you talk about that. We also run a dementia research info line here. So this is where people take calls from people interested about dementia research, getting involved in research studies. And not only do they have to communicate effectively and really simply to these people, but they're often people affected by dementia themselves, trying to get a diagnosis. So they've got to do so really empathetically as well. Not necessarily a skill that I can hold out for a large amount of time, but these people are really skilled in doing that. As I said, holding events and festivals, and also really internal communications. A bit like what I'm doing here, we try and encourage everyone to try and get better at science communication. It's something that you can all do to an extent, and it makes our jobs a lot easier if our staff can go out and talk about the science that we fund expertly to the best of their ability, because you know, they're not all scientists either. So we try and give them content that they can use as well. So I've mentioned that there's a lot of different things, and I think there's also a different career paths you can go down. You can go into journalism, you can become a press officer, which is what I do quite a lot of. But if that's not your thing, you can go into the policy space. And there's various different institutes and places where you can go and do this. A lot of commercial companies, think the big drug companies, the big AstraZenecas, GSKs, they all have people trying to engage stakeholders in research. This is a form of science communications, and often it's marketed as marketing, but this is a bit of science communications there. University is obviously a hub for all research. Think of university press officers, university outreach officers, conference producers, all that kind of stuff. The media, journalists, but also then we have the charity sector, which funds a heck of a lot of dementia research and all other forms of medical research. We have a team here doing all the things I'm describing, and also museums and educational facilities. I'm originally from the northeast of England, and the Centre for Life in Newcastle is a great example of a museum that's geared towards talking about research and science to the public. So there are many places to go to get this, and I will share a few assets and lists with you where you can look for jobs in the sector at the end. And you can always, don't hesitate to contact me on my email. I've also put the end, and I can drop you a line and give you some of this information as well. So I guess I'll go through some of the pros and cons of working in science communications. And obviously, because I'm here today, loving my job, I have more pros than cons. I find it extremely exciting and rewarding. Whereas you may spend many years doing a PhD or working as a postdoc, a lot of my work is turned around really quickly, and you see immediate impact of that, which is quite exciting. And even though I don't no longer work in the research field, I do keep on top of research every day. So all those stories you'll see in the news, for example, they're based on science papers that I have had to read, understood, to be able to communicate and write about them expertly. And also you stay across the wider field more so than you would if you were just focused on your own niche subject in the lab, and it's really great for that big picture kind of stuff. I also get to read your people's grant summaries and their progress. And in doing so, you build up fantastic relationships with top researchers. I was in the room before lockdown with in Wembley with Chief Medical Officer of the FA. I would never have thought I'd ever be there in my career, even last year. And you get to build top relationships with these people that you wouldn't normally have, and get to know some amazing people and learn a lot from them, which often you might not do if you're just in one lab for a long time. As I say, you learn what's going on in the field, talking to these researchers, reading this stuff, and that's really good for a learning opportunity as well. And I think really is what I like doing most is helping people understand science, seeing that or having those conversations with people who didn't understand something before you explained it to them in a way that you knew was simple to understand as well as engaging. And another thing, if you like this kind of thing, I kind of do, because that's what I try and achieve, is get my work in the public eye. Well, there's a caveat to this, that it's not always your name on that work. So some of the cons. It's extremely fast-paced at times and deadline-driven. If I was to get an email now from a journalist, it's past their copy deadline in 5 minutes, so I'd have to get something out the door as soon as possible. You don't have long time to plan, and when you do, you try and do it as quickly as possible, so you get onto the next thing and try and do your time that way. It can be quite nerve-wracking speaking on camera, but also if you're writing an expert comment for a story, what you say really matters. Some journalists will take it as read, or some people will take it as read, and it could really affect the lives of people that you're reaching. It can get quite frustrating, actually. So you may be talking to a scientist about their work and wanting to communicate that well, but they might not agree with you how you're communicating it. Scientists are notoriously nitpicking, and as well as trying to do things accurately, they can sometimes go over the top and try and cloud your thinking, and it's trying to work with them and get them with the best balance possible. But it does take time, and it can be frustrating in that case. And as I mentioned before, you don't always get the credits. So whereas I might I've probably written, I don't know, thousands of press comments in my time. I think a handful will have my name on it. A lot of the time you're writing on behalf of the expert. And whereas they do check that they check your work just to say yes, or, you know, they might have an odd comment here and there. It is you that have put the time behind it. So whereas you might have spent 3 years in the lab getting a paper, you get, you know, recognition for that. You don't always get the credit in science communications, but there are chances to. There are blogs you can write and other things you can do to get the credit. And also, as you move up your career, you might be working yourself into that position where you do. So I think it's quite a minor one, and you get used to it quite quickly. And sort of on the media side of thing, if you, just because you think a bit of science is really interesting, I heard some great examples from you guys there, doesn't mean the public is, or even if they do think it is, doesn't mean it's going to hit at the right time at that time, and that can be a bit frustrating for some people. But I said the thing that gets me up in the morning is because I think it's important, and I think I'm just outlining why I think it's important here. You know, it inspires people about science and the difference it can make. And I think we're living through a time where the trust in scientists is really being valued. And we're trying to build that trust to sort of combat the fake news, which in the quackery, which we see quite a lot in a lot of different places. And, you know, a lot of people have a science reading age of 9 to 11 years old, and I think a lot of people forget that a lot of people don't know or get put off by science, and without understanding some parts of science, it's really difficult to communicate the risks of certain things or the importance of health benefits or certain things. So it's really important that we get that accurately and engagingly across to try and help these people who need it. And also it builds trust in new advances in technologies. There's lots of big data stories coming out at the moment in AI, and the more that we can do to show how it's being used sort of dispels all the, you know, they're going to nick all our data that you see elsewhere. And also, you know, good press is really important for the places and yourselves that you work for. Otherwise they wouldn't be doing that. They try and push their name out there. You try and push your research. It attracts funders. It attracts collaborators. So it's really important from the career side of things, which I'm going to go on to talk about a little now for you. It helps. So science communications in general just helps you develop as a person. You know, it gets your message across more accurately. It helps you write research papers, helps you write reviews, even helps write you emails at times. And in doing that, it helps build collaborations with people, especially people that are not from your background or doing your topic, and that can be really useful. A physicist isn't necessarily going to understand your biological approach, but increasingly we're seeing physicists and biologists work together. You know, you're going to understand more about the conditions you're researching if you understand the science from other people, which is also important. And also that bit on that funding, it builds your public profile. It helps you attract maybe the best people to your lab, or puts your name out there for other recruiters or other PIs to see you're a good candidate for a job. But also ultimately, the science we do, what good is it unless it does some help? Does it have policy implications, your work? And by communicating effectively, you can influence these decision makers and do things based on your research. And you know, finally, just at journal club or something, discussing your findings, it becomes really important to do so in a way that is engaging. Otherwise, people are just going to yawn at a load of diagrams on a PowerPoint. And the final thing, I think, it's being measured by your funders a lot of the time. There's some new citation indexes that look at citations in press and things like that. It's not something Alzheimer's Research UK do, but we do obviously use work and how well. If you write a grant proposal well, you're going to do better than if you don't, put it that way. So that's kind of why science communications is important and what it is. And I think the rest of my talk, I'm going to highlight what you can do. I think that's what most people are here to listen about. So I think in the first instance, I've just got a few examples of things on the slide and what you can do. The first thing you can do is speak to your funders and university press officers and communications teams. If you've got something interesting and you want to highlight it, let them know. We're always looking for blogs about interesting things from our scientists, from a charity who funds research. That's what our supporters want to know, and it's I can write a blog, no problem, but what they want to hear is how it's making a difference to you. On the bottom right of this slide, you can see a Drosophila in a fruit bowl, and we've had some really nice blogs by this student Joe Sharp, who's been did some blogs on that, and I think it's great that the scientists have this blog site as well, and I think that'll become increasingly important to researchers throughout. We can see an Instagram account there again, and one of our researchers, one of the scientist members, Beth Eyre, has an Instagram account dedicated to science communication and her research, and that's really increased her profile, and also it's something great for everyone else, and it's a great starting point into going to the world of science communications. And if you're sort of leveling up to that level, why don't you just write articles and share them, on LinkedIn, on Scientist. You can always email a journalist, and as I said, your press officers as well. So it's all about starting that conversation. If you're more creative, you want to do something else, there's other things you can do. Here we've got examples of people making brain hats here. We take them to science festivals all the time, and this was a idea started by a scientist who had some spare time and made this hat, and a really good educational activity for kids. We've got a nerve cell in a dish, a brain in a dish, if you like, really getting across how research is done these days. And it was a plasticine model that you ask kids to make, and we've also got similar things with pipe cleaners and neurons, and they're great things to do. So traditional outreach events, these are great things to be doing and thinking about, and how could you do that with your work. So you've got some ideas there: blogs, stories, educational activities, social media posts. How to get started? I think it's really important to know your audience. If you're going to an outreach event and are going to deliver things to kids, you don't want to be giving a talk about science. You want to be doing something creative, hands-on. Whereas if you're giving a public meeting about people about dementia, it's actually going to be a lot different to giving a public meeting about people at plants. The people interested in dementia are generally older. You have to talk slower. You have to do many things differently than you would if you were talking to someone about crop science who might be less old, and it's just different things to consider there. Most importantly, I think you've got to tell a story. So science is interesting and fascinating to us, and that's what you want to get across to other people, but they can get bogged down in jargon and numbers. What is tangible and what's sticky are stories. So that's what we really want to talk about. And to be able to tell that story, you've got to be able to say what the message is. What is the take-home message of that story? And normally I think about this as, what's the headline? If think about it, these people are only going to be able to take away one or two things from your piece, and they're going to be able to remember that. So just think of that and have that in the back of your mind when you write your story or your piece. Once you decide that, you've got to decide how you communicate it. Do you go for a blog? Do you go for a press release? Do you go for a short video? That's all going to decide how you go about writing it. As I say, keep it simple. Avoid any technical jargon unless you really have to. So even things like Drosophila melanogaster, it's a fruit fly. We get a lot of amyloid beta because that's the toxic form of amyloid, but just amyloid, because people don't understand what the beta is, and I know it's technically not 100% correct, but it is good enough. I think you've got to remember that these people have a science literacy age of 9 or 11, so as simple as possible is what you got to go. And I've got an example of that a bit further on. Use illustrations and diagrams, but do them well. Don't overcomplicate them. We've got an example there of sketching science that I showed you before. Try and keep it human. A lot of the work we do is about dementia. It's quite a sensitive subject. Scientists still use terms like we use demented patients, which is not the tone that a lot of people with dementia want to hear. We looked at this subject and they suffer from the condition. So be neutral where you can. People live with the condition, and try and just be mindful of who you're writing for and who may see it. Again, keep it simple, short and sweet. the more blank space, the better. From a copywriter, that sounds horrible, but the more blank space, the better it scans. And there's lots of evidence to show people just flick through their screen now and only read in an F-shaped fashion. So lines at the top, 2 lines get read the most, and then they sort of scan the first start of the words. So bear that in mind if you're writing a piece. And this one's quite an interesting one. Try and write in the active voice. So throughout our careers, we're drilled to say this experiment was carried out at 37 degrees in the incubator, which sounds quite dull. Whereas if you say researchers carried out the experiment, it already adds a sense of urgency, and that skill of writing an active voice is it can be difficult to do at first, but you get used to it pretty quickly. There's some really nice tools actually available on the internet. One's called the Hemingway app, which helps you write in a more active voice and will flag any lines that are not. So I suggest you check that out as well. And the biggest one is don't try and blag your way through it. If you can't explain it simply, you just don't understand it well enough. Spend that time trying to understand what it is you're trying to get across, and then spend some time trying to translate that. There's no point just having a go, because you're going to make a mess of it. And then quite rightly, someone's going to come back at you and say, actually, this isn't factually correct. And you can't just say, oh, actually, that's just a word that we use to try and avoid jargon. If you don't understand it well enough, you're going to probably find that you've done yourself a cropper at some point. So this is an example of science communications in action, I guess. This is a standard research paper. And I think you've got to remember, as I said, that people have that really low science reading age. So if they read this, they're not going to understand it. Shears, using the garden stress, or I'm really stressed here. So you're thinking, what is this about? I'm refolding some sheets, and protein, I get that, we go to the gym. And then the rest of it, you just, what is that? And a lot of scientists will say, oh, I understand it. But then you have been doing science from a young age for all this time. Actually, this story is actually quite interesting, and it's scientists discover a way to unboil an egg. And it's not as pointless as it sounds. That's a really interesting story to people. Now, I haven't read the paper enough to know if that's an overhyped headline, but it gets people hooked into the story, and then they can read it in their own fashion. The Guardian covered it, TEDx covered it, so there's clearly some good science behind it. So yeah, just be careful on what you say. And on that point, we've been drilled to say the experiment was carried out by this and that, and use all these technically correct terms. We've also been told how to write. Every single research paper is your abstract, your intro, background, your methods, your conclusion. But as I said, what is the so what? You want one thing to take away from it. You want that at the very top. You want your finding. What did you find? Why is your research important? And then you want to go into, I found Alzheimer's disease is caused by X, Y, and Z. And then you say, the background, why is that important? Alzheimer's disease is a horrible condition that affects so many people, and there's no cure. And then you can put those supporting details. The researchers teamed up from across the world to do X, Y, and Z. So it gives it some impetus from the get-go, which you can just lose people if you start giving them the details first. And try and just keep your messages to 1 or 2 that you feel are most important. What did the research to cover? What was the point of it? Why is it important, and how are you doing it? I think you can try and distill most things into those 3 headings. So that's about sort of writing about science. What about talking about it? If you've got a paper coming out, or you've got a review, or you just want to talk about your research, get in touch with the university funder or press officer. What they'll do is they'll most likely draft a press release that gets sent out to the media, and they'll probably even write a quote for you too. They'll put your words in your mouth, and you'll have to say yes or no, or draft up something yourself in response to that. And when it gets to that stage, they'll go out to the journalists, and the journalists are very busy people. They write lots of stories a day, and they rely on the science communicators to be able to do half their job for them, to clearly explain what the top line is. And you have to be ready to respond quickly. They're not going to waste their time, waiting for a reply for a day. If they don't get a response in an hour, even less, they might be on to the next story. And And sometimes if they want a story, and let's say your PI's got a big story in the news, if he's doing one interview, and he's not able to do another, or he's got a meeting, they're just going to find the next doctor or professor available. They don't really mind who it is, as long as they've got that title. So you've got to respond quickly, and they rely on you for your steer. So actually you play a really important role, even though they want you to be quick. They're not experts in the subject either, so they do value you. So they shouldn't get a bad rap, but they do certainly hurry you up. And as a scientist, you do share that sort of shared responsibility, really, with the journalist and the press officer for good science reporting. If you say something that's slightly over the top or overhyped, or you get really excited saying, "Oh, I think this is a really exciting development in the field," or "This is the most exciting thing to me in the research," that could get quoted and quite easily blown out of proportion very, very quickly. So I think you just need to be really mindful of what you're saying, and that sort of goes towards that nervousness of getting involved, but also being passionate about your work. And also, I think a lot of scientists that I know get really frustrated with the papers about overhyped research. As I said, that's not always the journalist's fault. You've got to understand the media landscape in the UK, that journalists generally write really good, effective stories, and the headlines are written by a completely different set of people. They're written by sub-editors whose job it is to sell newspapers, and they don't really care about the science understanding. And that's a big part of my job, is sometimes going back to these people and saying, actually, this is off the mark. And the journalists go like, I know, we have to fight with this every day. So it's a really difficult one to try and draw the line to. But obviously some outlets are better than others, and but that's not to say they're not better for everyone. So I think it's got good examples here. A lot of people don't like the Daily Mail or the Sun. They call it the hate mail and other derogatory terms. But I think to myself that I'm doing people a bit of good, actually. Sometimes, the people that really need health information, for example, the most, are the people probably reading these outlets. They're the ones that need to know about the latest in research and need this drilled home. So there's swings and roundabouts. And I think it's, again, a part of this overhyping. Just be careful when you're being asked to speculate about the future implications of your work. If your work is, heard someone before saying their work was in I think they said it was in zebrafish or animals, or state that. There's a big disconnect between basic lab research and what happens in humans. I think sometimes that is often the source of overhyped stuff. So really, it's all I have to say. I just wanted to put some examples of where you can go and get some great SciComms. Speak to university, department, funder, whoever it may be who can help you out. Scientists are a great place to go for that now. They've got opportunities there for people. Volunteer at science festivals. There's lots of them going on across the UK. Maybe not so much at the moment, but they will be back, because they're a massive interest to people. In events, I went to Latitude Festival. There's these kind of things going on in the background. I know there's Einstein's Garden in Wales, and a few other things at Greenman, I think that one is. But there are things going on that you can get involved in. There's some links there to some websites. You can become a STEM ambassador at your university. But then there's also Facebook groups, STEM SciComm Social. They happen all over the country. You've got Pint of Science as well, which is also a great opportunity. And there's also this thing called the SciComms mailing list, which gives you job opportunities and different other discussions that you might be able to get involved in. It's an old-fashioned email list there. I don't know if this works, but I'll try it. No. Oh, yep.
The audio doesn't work, Ed, I think.
That's fine. I'll share the PowerPoint with everyone on this call and we can watch it. But this was just an example of a communications campaign that we did that really hit home with a lot of people. Communicating your research effectively, we used the orange to symbolize the amount of brain tissue lost by dementia. Yeah, and I'll share that with you guys.
I think it's because of your headset, so I think
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, I'm in the office, so I didn't didn't want to take a headset off. And that's it really for me. Just good luck to everyone here. I think everyone's obviously on the call because they're interested in science communications, and I'm open to have any questions, or if you don't feel comfortable having them, I'm sure Hassan will feel free to pass on my email address as well.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for that, Ed. That was really, really good. Some really useful tips, and I think some of the questions I've been writing down, I think you have answered through the session. So I'll just open it up to everyone for some questions. So yeah, feel free to ask Ed anything related to his presentation or his career so far.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went from research to SciComm. How did you manage to blag that with the job application?
Oh, I don't know.
How did you just be like, oh, I'm a researcher, but now I want to do science communication, hire me? Like, what did you, like, did you do any sort of like training in the background, or how did you what did the job application ask for, and how did you tailor your answers from research to get the job?
So I started my own bit of social media when I was doing research. I did radio shows where I presented news about science, and like wacky news stories about science and things like that. I also wrote for the paper, student paper, and papers and stuff, and wrote a blog. And also, I was at University. We have a module where we do business. A business science and business enterprise module, which I did a lot of science communication work through that, and I had really good references from people where I did a lot of stuff through that, and sort of just tailored my application around those things. I think I was quite upfront. I think they knew when they took me on that I had not had extensive experience in that, but I think my writing, they said my writing was what they wanted, so I think I got the job based on that, and I was quite honest in the interview, I think, but tried to tailor everything towards it. But I appreciate it's very difficult, and I still don't know. I still need to message my boss why I got it. I remember I was at a Christmas party with him after I got the job, and he said, "Ed, in your interview, do you know you said to Adolf Alzheimer invented Alzheimer's disease?" And I was like, "Did I?" But it must have been nerves that I said, because I meant to say Alois Alzheimer, and so I'm not sure what it was, and I know lots of people apply for science communication job. We get 50 job applications for every one position here, but I think it's encouraging that actually a lot of them aren't very well put together. So if you do a good application, good in the questions, and you tailor things, you are more than likely to get an interview. And then it's about your personality a lot of the time, and how you answer that.
Did you find it hard to transition between the two fields?
I came to the decision that I really didn't like my research as much as I liked other things, and this was just literally the perfect job. And I was, I felt like I fitted in very quickly. But yeah, I had a lot to learn pretty quickly, but I think I had a supportive team where we did, and I've got to a position where I'm quite quickly. So yeah, I guess it was difficult to start. I didn't know anything about Alzheimer's disease as well. Really, that was my biggest worry. I did a bit of neurology because of how the pesticides interacted with the nerve system and stuff like that. So I spent the first month, as well as writing up thesis and stuff like that. I read it just reading around, and in-depth reading, and trying to learn as much as possible about the field. And I think, as I said, understanding it really helps you communicate it effectively. And I think you've got to realize that also in an organization like this, a lot of people don't know about science at all. So you're already at an advantage and looking good to other people. So a lot of it is about confidence at that interview, and, communicating well, preparing effectively, just like you would for any other job, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers, thanks, Ed. Anyone else?
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, obviously you've started working for a charity, but there are quite a lot of like medical comms companies that aren't, you know, charities. And I just wondered if that was like a conscious decision, or whether you know, you were just kind of applying to all of them.
So no, I didn't apply to medical like medical writing things a lot. There's a lot of you know, stuff, public science publications like PLOS and Nature and Lancet also have these kind of job and press offices. No, it wasn't, but I wouldn't have applied to one of them. And looking at it now, I think the charity space is so rewarding, from not just because it's a charity, but the variation I have in my role I've been explaining to in. If you're a medical writer, that's what you do. You write papers, review papers, and might send out a press release, and that's it. And I do that, and that's a lot of my job. But I also have so many other things to do just because of the space we're in and what medical research charities do. And as you get to a bigger organization, actually, obviously you become more siloed into what you do. And I joined an organization which was quite small to medium sized when I came here, and now we're much bigger. We've grown so quickly. So it's about the size of the organization as well, and what suits you. You've got to be quite careful with some of those medical writing positions. I think there's some horror stories out there of people who've gone to London and you know, basically been used for, not slave labor, but ridiculous wages for the positions and for the qualifications they have. You know, and it's not rewarding. But having said that, there's some great places to do it as well. Some of my great friends are in like Lancet press offices and things like that, and you know, that's equally as good a job and as rewarding. So it wasn't the charity side of things that attracted me, but looking at it now, when I look for other options in my career, I do look for the charitable sector.
Okay, thank you very much.
Cheers, Bobby, for the question. Thanks, Ed. We're running a bit out of time, so just one more question from everyone.
I might have one. So it's kind of related to, you know, applying for it, because, you know, there are people who do science comm like as a degree, and you know, what's one advice that you would give to make you stand out?
I think this is a really good question, that we're seeing a lot of these science communications courses, and I think if you haven't done it, don't be swayed that you haven't done it, because I don't think, if you're passionate about science communication and you've showed an understanding of what it is, and you've given some examples, and you've read around the basics, and you've done things, that you don't need the theory behind why it's important. I think we all know that, and I don't think employers look for that either. You're getting a wealth of people coming out doing these science communication courses, and they can't write a CV, for example, or don't perform well at interview. If you're passionate and come across well, then I don't think it matters at all. And I know a few people that have done it. I wouldn't say they're great at science communicating, so obviously they might be as well. So I don't think it adds much.
Yeah, I guess passing a degree doesn't mean that you're a good science communicator.
No, exactly. And just like passing a degree doesn't necessarily mean you're good at bench science. You might be good at writing about it in exams. That being said, it is obviously a way to go for some people who want to do that. And, good luck to them, and, I hope they have fun doing it.
Right, thanks.
Cheers, Apple. Ed, I have just two questions. One quickly.
That's fine, go ahead.
Like Apple asked for people doing science comm, obviously to stand out. And I've seen in other profession, when I was looking at the legal industry, you have open days and things like that in these corporate firms. Is there something that Alzheimer's or other societies do, like to give a bit of in-depth?
We have, to the researchers we fund, we all offer them, like especially early career researchers. I think other medical research charities may do this, others may not. We have early career days where we invite our researchers to come and learn about science communications and what they can do. And we go out to events and we talk about that as well. But it's not really like a polished thing. There are places you can go and get that kind of thing. There's some like copywriting courses you can go on, and you can go to these institutions that are starting to offer it more and more. I've not seen any benefit to having one yet.
Yeah, yeah. Just another quick one. So, for example, if I'm doing my PhD, right, and I really enjoy my research, and I also like communicating it. So, is there a way to juggle both of them, like stay in research, but also earn some money through SciComm, or give my thoughts on certain blogs and things like that?
Well, I think you're doing quite well, Hassan, with scientists by doing that. So, a perfect way. You've got a platform there. Yes, you could become a freelance writer, for example. I've sometimes it's quite hard with my work because any science that I'm writing for other people is obviously going to be in competition with the science that I want for work for news. But if you're doing your PhD, that's not necessarily the case. You can be writing articles and sending them to newspapers. Asking for money. You could be setting up a blog, and how Google ads and all that kind of stuff work. Is YouTube is a massive thing. There are ways to do it. I think you have got to be careful with between work-life balance. I think that's a really big thing, and I definitely haven't nailed that yet, so I can't profess to be an expert on it. And I think just trying to keep the two as separate as possible, which is what I'm really bad at doing, is the best way to go. So if you are going to be doing that, dedicate some time to it. One, because it's going to be better if you dedicate a small amount of time to it. And two, it's going to help your mental health. You don't want to be thinking about the blog you're writing while you're trying to set up an experiment. Yes, there's lots of downtime in the lab, and maybe use that time a bit more effectively. But yeah, just try and keep it as separate as possible. But obviously inspired by your own lab stuff.
Can I say something quick? Sorry,
Yeah,
just about the it's more to Hassan. Have you seen Massive Science? They're a thing. They do articles on research. They're specifically for scientists, and they pay you for your articles, and you can pitch to them like it's only scientists that write them.
Okay, fab. Massive Science.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fab.
Yeah, and another example of some of that outreach stuff as well. I got paid to do bits and bobs at university when they had we had a botanic garden, and they wanted volunteers and student volunteers, but it was paid £5 an hour for a day. So there are things you can do slowly to get there and get some experience. And the final thing to say is that everyone tries to get this experience, and a lot of people ask for voluntary time. Try see if you can stick your ground and say, no, actually, I'm really good at this. Can you pay me £5 or £10 for an afternoon's work? And at least it's not nothing, which a lot of people just do for a long time. But it is difficult.
Cheers, Ed. So we'll just start closing it down now. A lot of what Ed mentioned, even from our point of view, from what we have seen from scientists, the best science communicators, we have also we have a decent view of the best science communicators and the students trying to do that. And one of them, as Ed mentioned, is starting their own blog or a scientist blog, because we can immediately give the recognition and the outlet through a social media, advertising, newsletters. So you immediately get recognized by someone like Ed, even universities. So we actually had someone, Ken, so he does a lot of science videos as well. He got noticed by a university through the platform and got invited for a talk for the conference as a